Good evening, children of the night. The signal is strong, the air is cold. I am Damien Tao, and you have tuned into Netherwave Radio, the frequency that bleeds between worlds. The hour is late. The veil is thin. Tonight, I bring you two tales from the frozen northern villages of China, where the winter wind carries more than snow. Some say that kindness is its own reward. Others whisper that the dead watch over those who showed them mercy. And still others know with bone-deep certainty that hatred can reach beyond the grave to strangle the living. These two stories will show you both paths. Close your eyes if you must, but whatever you do, do not answer if you hear knocking at midnight. Turn off the lights now. Let us begin with a woman named Song, whose heart was as soft as temple silk. The 13th day of the 10th lunar month. In Chinese tradition, this is a day when the barrier between our world and the realm of hungry ghosts grows paper thin. A day for temple festivals, and for things that should not walk to take their first steps. In Stone Official Village of Yongnian County, a woman named Song Yinglian woke before the sun. She was 43 years old, with calloused hands and a kind face weathered by northern winters. She ate her breakfast, quickly cold rice, pickled vegetables, the food of the poor but the food of the living. Today was market day, and she had vegetables to buy. Before leaving, Song walked to the family altar, a simple wooden table against the eastern wall, where photographs of the dead watched over the living. Her mother sat before it, burning incense for the ancestors. Mother, I'm going to the market. Song bowed slightly as custom demanded. The old woman turned. Her face was heavy with something unspoken. She reached out and gripped her daughter's shoulder too tightly, too desperately. I dreamed of your aunt last night. The mother's voice was barely a whisper. Song felt ice crawl down her spine. In Chinese culture, to dream of the dead is never mere coincidence. The deceased visit the living for one reason only: to deliver a message. Sometimes a warning, sometimes a summons. Song wanted to ask more, but her mother waved her away. Go, we'll talk when you return. The market won't wait. Song nodded once, and pushed her wooden cart out into the morning. The wind hit her face like a slap from a dead hand, bitter, biting, 5 degrees below zero. To reach the market, she had to pass through the alley. Everyone in Stone Official Village knew the alley. It ran north to south between two high walls of crumbling brick. The sun never touched its floor. Even in summer, the stones wept with moisture. In winter, ice formed patterns that looked almost like faces. On one side stood the ruins of an abandoned courtyard house. The walls had not been repaired in 20 years. Plaster peeled away in strips that hung like dead skin. Through the gaps, you could see the black interior empty rooms that seemed to breathe. Children whispered that something lived in that courtyard. Something that watched through the holes in the wall. Something that waited. Song quickened her pace. Her cart wheels crunched over dead leaves that had blown into the alley and frozen there. The sound was too loud. The silence that followed was too complete. She did not look at the ruined walls. She did not look at the darkness watching through the gaps. She walked faster, faster, until she burst out of the alley's mouth and into the chaos of the market. The noise hit her like a warm wave, vendors shouting, customers haggling. The clatter of wooden crates. Song exhaled. Safety. Humanity, life. But then her eyes caught something at the market's edge. A figure alone. Apart from all the others, an old woman stood at the very boundary where the market's life ended, and the empty road began. She was skeleton thin, wrapped in faded yellow clothing that might once have been cheerful, but now looked like jaundiced skin. Her face was a landscape of sorrow, deep wrinkles carved by decades of hardship, eyes that had seen too much death, a mouth that had forgotten how to smile. Her white hair tangled, unwashed, wild lifted in the cold wind like smoke rising from a funeral pyre, like the offerings burned for the dead. Song's breath caught. Without understanding why, tears welled in her eyes. A wave of grief crashed over her, sudden, overwhelming, unexplainable. She wiped her face quickly, embarrassed. Why was she crying? She didn't even know this old woman. But something pulled at her, a thread she couldn't see. A connection she couldn't name. Song wanted to go to the old woman immediately to buy whatever meager goods she was selling, but she forced herself to be practical. She had a list. She had a budget. She would walk through the market first, then buy from the old woman on her way out. After all, the old woman was right at the entrance. She wouldn't go anywhere. Song pushed her cart into the market's heart. She picked through vegetables with a housewife's careful eye: eggplants, cabbage, radishes, apples, pears, filling her cart until it overflowed. When she finally emerged from the crowd, her eyes went straight to the market's edge, the old woman's spot. The white-haired grandmother was still there, still waiting, still alone. Song's heart clenched. But then reality struck. Her cart was already full, overflowing. There was no room for anything else. A strange guilt gnawed at her. She had promised herself. She had meant to help. But now, Song's footsteps slowed as she approached the alley that would take her home. The same alley. The one with the watching walls and the frozen silence. She looked back one more time. The old woman's eyes met hers across the distance, clouded, dim, but somehow seeing everything. Those eyes held no accusation, only a quiet hope, a desperate, silent prayer. And then Song looked at the old woman's stall, what she was selling. Pumpkins. Just a handful of pumpkins, irregular shapes, ugly skin, the kind that other vendors wouldn't even bother displaying. No one would buy these pumpkins, not when the other stalls had perfect ones. The old woman had probably been standing there all morning, watching customer after customer walk past without a second glance. Song felt something tear inside her chest. She thought of her own mother. She thought of growing old alone. She thought of standing in the cold, waiting for someone Anyone to show kindness. She couldn't walk away. She simply couldn't. But her cart was full. There was no room, unless... At that moment, footsteps echoed in the alley behind her. A middle-aged woman emerged, heading toward the market. A stranger. She carried an empty basket. Song made a decision that would save her life. "Wait, sister, please wait," Song called out, waving her hand. The stranger stopped, confused. Song hurried over, already pulling vegetables from her cart. "Here, take these. Cabbage, radishes. I bought too much, and my cart is full." Song pushed the vegetables into the woman's arms. "I want to go back and buy something else. Please, take them." The stranger's face transformed from confusion to grateful surprise. She thanked Song profusely and hurried on her way, arms full of unexpected bounty. Song turned her cart around. She wheeled it back toward the market's edge, toward the old woman, toward the ugly pumpkins that no one else wanted. "Grandmother," Song said softly, kneeling before the tiny stall, "I'll take all of your pumpkins. Every single one." The old woman's eyes widened. For a long moment, she simply stared as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then slowly, a smile spread across that ancient face. It was faint, barely more than a shadow, but it was real, genuine. Song loaded the pumpkins carefully into her cart. They fit perfectly in the space she had made, as if they had been meant to be there all along. She paid more than the asking price. The old woman tried to refuse, but Song insisted. "Please, for good fortune." The warmth in Song's heart was like a small fire against the winter cold. She had done something good, something right. She bowed to the grandmother, turned her cart toward home, and began her journey back through the alley. The alley swallowed her whole, cold, silent. The walls pressed in on either side like the ribs of some great dead beast. The wind moaned through the gaps in the ruined walls. It sounded like weeping, like a woman crying for something lost forever. Song walked faster. Her cartwheels protested against the frozen stones. The sound echoed off the walls too loud. too sharp. She was almost through, almost home. Just a few more meters, and she would emerge into the light of her village street. Then she stopped, in the middle of the alley, her breath coming in sharp, frozen gasps. Something was wrong. Something deep in her gut was screaming at her. That ancient animal instinct that humans have forgotten how to hear. The one that says, "Do not move. Predator nearby." She stood in that frozen alley, trembling, listening. The wind had stopped. The moaning had ceased. The world held its breath. And then... crash. The ruined wall of the abandoned courtyard collapsed with a thunderous roar. Bricks and plaster and decades of decay came crashing down in an avalanche of destruction. Dust erupted into the air, a choking yellow-gray cloud that swallowed the entire alley. The ground shook. The sound was like the world breaking apart. Song's legs buckled. She grabbed her cart to stay standing, her face white as funeral paper, cold sweat drenching her back despite the winter air. Her mind raced backward through time. If she hadn't gone back for the pumpkins, if she hadn't given away her vegetables, if she hadn't stopped to help the old woman, she would have been standing exactly where the wall fell, directly beneath 1,000 pounds of brick and mortar. She would have been buried, crushed, killed. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her knees gave out completely. She sat down hard on the frozen ground, shaking uncontrollably. At the edge of the market, people began to scream. They rushed toward the alley, shouting, panicked, certain that someone must have been killed. Thank heaven no one was hurt. Voices echoed through the dust. That wall should have fallen years ago. It is a miracle. The ancestors must have been watching today. Song barely heard them. She was staring at her cart, at the pumpkins nestled among her vegetables. Those ugly, unwanted pumpkins that had saved her life. She struggled to her feet. With trembling hands, she pushed her cart through the crowd, around the mountain of debris, and out of the alley through another path. When she finally stumbled through her front door, her mother was waiting. One look at Song's face, and the old woman knew something terrible had happened. Song poured out the entire story. The old woman at the market, the pumpkins, the collapsed wall. Her voice broke. Her tears flowed freely. Her mother's face grew strange, complex. A mixture of wonder and grief, and something like recognition. "This old woman," the mother whispered. "Tell me exactly what she looked like." Song described everything. The skeleton thin frame, the face carved with wrinkles, the wild white hair, the faded yellow clothing, the clouded eyes, and that smile, that gentle, sad, knowing smile. Her mother's tears spilled over. That sounds like your aunt, my older sister, the one who died. Song felt the world tilt beneath her feet. What? I told you this morning. I dreamed of her, my sister, your aunt. The mother gripped her daughter's hands. She came to me in my sleep. She didn't speak, she just smiled, and she walked away into a light I couldn't follow. Song's mind reeled. She thought of the old woman's eyes, those clouded eyes that had seemed to see straight through to her soul. And then she remembered. A photograph. An old photograph that hung on the wall of her grandmother's house when she was a child. Her aunt. Her mother's older sister. The woman had died when Song was barely 3 years old, too young to remember clearly, but old enough to retain fragments. Wisps of warmth, the feeling of being held, a gentle voice humming lullabies. Song walked slowly to the family altar. The incense her mother had lit that morning still burned, thin trails of smoke rising toward the ceiling like prayers ascending to heaven. Among the photographs of ancestors, grandfathers, and great-aunts and cousins long dead, there was one face, a younger face. A woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Song's blood turned to ice. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the nose, the way the lips turned up at the corners even in rest. It was the same face. Decades older, worn by time and suffering, but unmistakably the same. "Auntie," Song whispered, her voice cracking. "It was you. You came back. Her mother came to stand beside her. Together, they gazed at the photograph of a woman who had loved Song with all her heart, and who, it seemed, still did. She always said she would watch over you, the mother said softly. Even at the end, when she was too weak to speak, she would look at your baby picture and cry. She loved you more than anything in this world. Perhaps your kindness called to her, the mother continued. Perhaps she saw that you inherited her gentle heart, and she crossed back, just for a moment, to save the niece she never stopped loving. Song's knees hit the ground. She knelt before the altar, hands pressed together, head bowed. Tears fell freely onto the cold stone floor. Auntie, she said through her sobs, was it you? Did you come back to save me? Thank you, thank you, thank you. The incense smoke curled and danced in the still air. For just a moment, perhaps a trick of the light, perhaps something more, it seemed to form the shape of a gentle hand, reaching down to touch Song's bowed head, and then it dispersed, rising up through the ceiling, toward whatever heaven awaited those who loved without condition. That night, Song dreamed. In her dream, she was 3 years old again, small, innocent, safe, and her aunt was holding her, those same thin arms wrapped around her tiny body, that same gentle hand patting her back in slow, soothing circles. Her aunt said nothing. She simply smiled, that same smile Song had seen at the market, and held her close. Then, slowly, the aunt began to fade. Her body became translucent, like morning mist. Her warmth became memory. Her arms became light. Song tried to hold on. She reached out crying, "Auntie, auntie," but her small hands grasped only empty air. She woke with tears streaming down her face and dawn light creeping through her window. The winter morning was bitter cold, but somewhere deep in her chest, a warmth remained. She rose. She walked to the altar. She lit 3 fresh sticks of incense and placed them in the holder before her aunt's photograph. "Rest now, Auntie," she whispered. "Your granddaughter will live well, I promise." The smoke rose in a perfect vertical line, no wavering, no disturbance, as if guided by an unseen hand toward the heavens. From that day forward, Song kept the pumpkins. She dried them, preserved them, made them into cakes that she offered at her aunt's altar every year on the anniversary of her death. And whenever she passed through that alley, where a new wall now stood, sturdy and safe, she would pause. She would close her eyes. And she would whisper a quiet thank you to the aunt who had crossed the boundary of death itself to save her. Years later, when Song was old herself, white-haired and wrinkled and bent by time, she told this story to her grandchildren. They listened with wide eyes, clutching their mother's hands, caught between fear and wonder. "Remember," Song told them, her voice thin but strong, "be kind. Always be kind, because you never know when your kindness will save your life." She reached out and touched their small heads, one by one, blessing them with the same love her aunt had blessed her. And remember this too, love does not end with death. Those who loved you in life will find ways to protect you, even from beyond the grave. Static crackles. The radio signal wavers. That was the first tale, my midnight listeners. A story of kindness rewarded, of love that conquers even death, of protection from beyond the veil. But I warned you, there would be 2 stories tonight, and the second has no warmth in it. Some spirits do not return to protect. Some spirits return to destroy. Hatred is a chain that binds the dead to the living. Envy is a poison that seeps through the walls between worlds. And some curses are fed with incense and paper money, transforming the living into the dead before their time. Take a breath, steel yourself, because this next tale will not let you sleep peacefully. This is the story of a man named Liu. And what answered when something knocked on his door at midnight? Liu Dong was a simple man, a construction worker, 32 years old, honest hands, an honest face. No wife, no children, just years of backbreaking labor and a dream of owning his own home. He had saved for nearly a decade. Every yuan counted, every meal skipped, every comfort denied. And finally, he had enough. The apartment he bought was in an old complex on the city's forgotten edge, built in the 1980s, crumbling walls, peeling paint. The kind of place people moved away from, not into. But the price was right. And Liu Dong was not a man who believed in superstition. Buildings' hallways were tomb silent. Most apartments stood empty, their owners long gone, their doors sealed shut, their windows dark as dead eyes. Liu's new home was on the 3rd floor, apartment 302. When he first opened the door, dust swirled in the stale air like disturbed ghosts. Nothing a good cleaning won't fix, he told himself, ignoring the chill that crawled up his spine. Moving day was exhausting. Liu carried everything himself, the furniture, the boxes, the pieces of his modest life. By midnight, he was bone-tired, his muscles screaming for rest. He collapsed onto his bed, an old mattress on a simple frame, and fell into the deep, dreamless sleep of the utterly spent. He did not know that something was waiting for him to fall asleep. Knock. Knock. The sound ripped Liu from sleep like a hand reaching into his chest, sharp, urgent, rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. Liu sat up, rubbing his eyes. The red numbers on his phone glowed in the darkness. 12 a.m. exactly midnight. Who the hell knocks at midnight? He muttered, shuffling toward the door in his slippers. He opened the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Not a soul in sight. Just the flickering fluorescent light buzzing overhead and the rows of closed doors stretching into shadow. Liu leaned out, looking left, looking right. Nothing moved. The air was cold and still as a tomb. Kids playing pranks, he grumbled, shutting the door. Must be neighborhood brats. But even as he said it, a small voice in his head whispered, "What kids? This building is almost empty. Who lives here besides you?" He ignored the voice. He went back to bed. He slept eventually. Morning came gray and cold. Liu woke with a headache and a strange feeling, like something was wrong, but he couldn't identify what. Then he saw it. His front door was open. Not wide open, just slightly ajar. A thin crack of darkness, showing where the door had separated from its frame. Liu's blood chilled. He remembered closing that door. He remembered checking the lock. He was certain, absolutely certain, he had secured it before sleeping. He searched the apartment. Nothing was missing, nothing was disturbed. But the open door, that open door haunted him all day. It is an old building, he told himself. Find old locks, old doors, they don't close properly. That night, Liu stayed awake. He lay in bed, phone in hand, scrolling through news and videos. Anything to keep his eyes open, his mind occupied. 11:30 p.m., 11:45 p.m., 11:55 p.m., 12 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. Liu's heart stopped. The same knock, the same pattern, the exact same moment, midnight on the dot. Knock, knock, knock. He didn't want to answer. Every instinct screamed at him to stay in bed, to hide under the covers like a child. But the knocking continued, insistent, demanding, relentless. Knock, 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 knock. Liu threw off his blanket. He stormed to the door, anger overriding fear, the anger of a working man whose only rest was being stolen. He yanked the door open. Nothing. The hallway was empty, the same flickering light, the same rows of closed doors, the same deathly silence. But this time, Liu didn't just look. He stepped out. He walked to the stairwell, peered up and down, checked every corner he could see. Nothing, no one, not even the echo of fleeing footsteps. That night, Liu double-locked his door. He checked it 3 times. He even wedged a chair under the handle. In the morning, the door was open again. The chair had been moved aside. The chain hung loose. The deadbolt was unlocked, and Liu had not heard a single sound. For 5 nights, the pattern repeated. Every night at exactly midnight. The knocking, every morning, the door standing open. Liu was unraveling. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. Dark circles carved themselves beneath his eyes like bruises. He told his neighbors, the few who still lived in the building. They looked at him like he had lost his mind. The building makes noises, one old woman said, shaking her head. Old buildings do that. You're just not used to it. Maybe you're sleepwalking, another suggested. Opening the door yourself and not remembering. But Liu knew. He knew in his bones that something was wrong. Something that had nothing to do with old buildings or sleepwalking. On the 6th night, Liu made a decision. He would not answer the door. He would not even look at it. He would hide in the stairwell and wait to see who or what came knocking. 11:55 p.m. Liu crept out of his apartment and positioned himself just around the corner, where he could see his door but remain hidden in shadow. His heart pounded so loud he was sure it would give him away. Sweat soaked his shirt despite the cold. 11:58 分 11:59分 12 a.m. Knock. 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 Liu's blood froze in his veins. He was staring directly at his door. There was no one there, no one in the hallway, no one anywhere. But the door was shaking, vibrating with each knock. The sound was real. The impacts were real. The knocker was invisible. Knock. 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 Liu screamed. He couldn't help it. The sound tore out of his throat, a primal shriek of terror that echoed through the empty corridor. He ran down the stairs, out of the building into the frozen night. He didn't stop until he was 3 blocks away, gasping for breath, legs burning, heart threatening to explode. He didn't go back that night. He slept in an internet cafe, huddled in a corner, jumping at every sound. In the morning, he forced himself to return. The apartment was his. He had spent everything on it. He couldn't afford to abandon it. The door was open. Of course it was. It was always open now. A week later, Liu's friend came to visit. A good friend, someone who had known him since childhood, who worried about the dark circles under his eyes and the tremor in his voice when they spoke on the phone. Something's wrong with this place, Liu told him, his voice hoarse from too many sleepless nights. Something I can't explain. The friend listened to everything. The midnight knocking. The doors that opened by themselves, the invisible force that made the wood shake and tremble. When Liu finished, his friend was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was strange. When I came in, he said slowly, I noticed something. The apartment next to yours, the one across the hall. What about it? Liu asked. The gap under the door. It is completely black, not just dark black, like something is blocking all the light from inside. Liu felt a chill crawl down his spine. He had never looked closely at that door before. He had assumed it was just another empty apartment. That apartment, Liu said slowly, memory surfacing. The old man who used to live there. He died about a month ago, fell from scaffolding at a construction site, died. The friend's face paled. His family won't come near this place. They say it is unlucky, haunted. Maybe. The apartment has been locked up ever since. The friend's expression hardened with resolve. We need to see what is in there. I have a feeling about this. A bad feeling. You mean break in? Liu asked. I mean find answers. Liu was a construction worker, strong, skilled. The old door gave way easily under his shoulder. One solid hit, and it crashed inward. The smell hit them first. A wave of decay and rot, and something else. Something chemical and acrid, like burnt offerings, like incense ash mixed with mold. Both men gagged. Liu pulled his shirt over his nose. His friend did the same, but they pressed forward into the darkness. The curtains were drawn tight. Not a sliver of light penetrated the room. The darkness was absolute, thick and heavy as funeral cloth. Liu fumbled for a light switch. Found one, flicked it. Nothing. The power had been cut long ago. His friend pulled out his phone, activated the flashlight. A beam of white light cut through the black, and both men froze in absolute terror. In the center of the room stood a table, and on that table, arranged with horrifying precision, was a shrine. A shrine to Liu Dong. His photograph, a large color print, clearly taken without his knowledge, sat propped in the center. His face, his eyes, staring back at him from this room of death. On either side of the photograph stood two thick incense sticks, the kind burned only for the dead, the kind placed before coffins at funerals. They had been burning for a long time. The ash had accumulated into two small gray mountains, and beneath the photograph, filling a basin the size of a washbowl, was a mountain of burnt paper money, hell money currency for the dead. Someone had been burning offerings to Liu Dong, treating him as if he were already dead, performing funeral rites for a living man. In Chinese tradition, this is the darkest curse imaginable. To burn incense and paper money for the living is to summon death upon them, to call their soul to the underworld while their body still breathes. To transform them, ritual by ritual, into a ghost before their time. What the fuck? Liu's friend whispered, his voice shaking. What the actual fuck? Liu couldn't speak. His legs had turned to water. His mind had gone blank with horror. He stared at his own photograph, at his own face being worshipped as a dead man, and felt his sanity cracking. The midnight knocking. Something had been knocking to claim his soul. The door opening every morning, his spirit being pulled, inch by inch, out of his body toward the realm of the dead. And the man who had cursed him, the dead neighbor who had fallen from the scaffolding, had done this out of envy, out of hatred, out of spite. Liu had bought the apartment the dead man could never afford. Liu was living the life the dead man had wanted. And so the dead man had reached back from hell itself to drag Liu down with him. We have to destroy this, Liu's friend said, his voice suddenly hard. All of it, now. Rage exploded through Liu's veins, hot, blinding, powerful enough to burn away the fear. You want to curse me? He screamed into the darkness. You want to kill me? I'll destroy you first. He kicked the table. It flew across the room and crashed against the wall. The photograph shattered. The incense holder scattered. The basin of ash exploded into a cloud of gray dust. And then, San Samang. The door crashed shut behind them. Both men spun around. Liu's friend grabbed the handle, pulled with all his strength. It wouldn't budge, not an inch, as if something massive and invisible was holding it closed from the other side. And then the laughter began. Not human laughter, something else. Something that had forgotten what joy felt like and only remembered hatred. A sound like grinding bones, like nails on a coffin lid, like the death rattle of 1,000 souls. It filled the room. It bounced off the walls. It crawled into their ears and burrowed into their brains. Who is there? Liu screamed. Show yourself. The laughter only grew louder, mocking, triumphant. The sound of something that knew it had already won. Then, a chair in the corner of the room rose into the air. No hands touched it. No strings held it. It simply lifted, defying gravity, defying reason, defying everything Liu thought he knew about the world. And then it flew at Liu's head. He ducked. The chair smashed against the wall behind him, exploding into splinters. Before he could recover, everything in the room came alive. Cups, Bowls, plates, books, they rose into the air like a swarm of angry wasps and attacked. Liu's friend was hit first. A heavy ceramic pot caught him in the temple. Black ichor no blood poured down his face as he collapsed. Liu tried to shield himself, but the objects came too fast. A cup struck his arm. A book hit his back. A bowl shattered against his shoulder, cutting deep. Black blood seeped from a dozen wounds. Liu's vision blurred. His legs buckled. He fell to his knees beside his unconscious friend. The laughter in the room reached a crescendo, a shrieking, triumphant howl of victory. Liu understood now. The altar, the incense, the paper money, all of it was designed to make the curse work. Every night at midnight, the dead man knocked on Liu's door, calling his soul. Every morning, Liu's spirit was dragged a little further out of his body toward the grave that waited for him. The funeral offerings transformed Liu in the eyes of the spirit world from living to dead. The paper money paid for his passage to hell. The incense announced his death to the ancestors. All that remained was for Liu's body to catch up with his soul, and tonight it would. Liu's eyes began to close. His breath grew shallow. The laughter in the room softened to a satisfied whisper. The sound of a hunter watching its prey finally stopped struggling. The last thing he heard was the laughter. The last thing he felt was cold, a cold deeper than winter, deeper than ice, deeper than the grave itself. And then nothing. The bodies were found the next day. Liu Dong and his friend lay in the hallway outside apartment 302. Not inside the cursed room, but in the corridor between the two apartments. As if they had tried to escape, but collapsed before reaching safety. Liu's eyes were open wide, staring at nothing, his face frozen in expression of absolute terror. His friend's skull was cracked. Black blood had pooled beneath his head, congealing on the cold concrete floor. Police investigated. They found no evidence of foul play, no fingerprints, no weapons, no sign of any other person being present. The door to apartment 301, the dead neighbor's apartment, was locked again, as if it had never been opened. Inside, there was nothing. No table, no photograph, no incense, no paper money. No basin of ash, just an empty room gathering dust. The case was closed, unsolved, filed away and forgotten. But the residents of that building knew the truth. They whispered it to each other in the stairwells. They warned newcomers. They crossed themselves when they passed apartment 302. No one ever moved into Liu Dong's apartment again. And they say even now that if you walk past that building at midnight, you can hear it. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoes through the empty corridors. It never stops. It never rests. Because some spirits cannot find peace, and some hatred burns forever. Some say you can see Liu's ghost now, kneeling in the corridor, holding incense, burning paper money for himself, forever performing his own funeral rites, forever trapped between life and death, forever answering the knock that claimed his soul. Static crackles, the signal wavers, then steadies, and so ends our broadcast. My faithful listeners, 2 stories, 2 very different endings. Song Yinglian's kindness saved her life. A moment of compassion, a few worthless pumpkins, and she was spared from a death that waited beneath a crumbling wall. Perhaps it was her aunt. Perhaps it was karma. Perhaps it was something we cannot name, a force that rewards the good and punishes the wicked. But Liu Dong had no such protector. He moved into a home built on envy, and died in a room consecrated to his destruction. The dead man's hatred followed him beyond the grave, and in the end, hatred won. So tell me, children of the night, what lesson do you take from these tales? Is this world haunted? Do ghosts walk among us? Can the dead reach back and touch the living? I do not know. I have seen too much to be certain of anything. But I know this. The goodness in your heart is more powerful than any curse, and the hatred in your enemy's heart can follow you beyond the grave. Be kind. Be good. Store up virtue like coins in a vault, because you never know when you will need to spend them. And if you hear knocking at midnight, look through the peephole first. Ask who it is. Make sure you know what waits on the other side before you open that door. Incense burns low, and the shadows return to their corners. If you survive these tales, subscribe to Netherwave Radio so you don't miss the warning when the spirits rise again. Sleep with one eye open, my friends. This has been Netherwave Radio. I am Damien Tial. The frequency never dies as long as there are stories too dark to tell in daylight. Until next time, if there is a next time for you, good night and good luck.